Hopefully there's no problem. I want to thank you all for coming today. I'm Helen Rose, for those who may not know, representing Herkimer County Legislature District Number 2, and I'm joined today with Gary Hartman, representing Herkimer County Legislative District 1. Unfortunately, John Brzezinski, the Democratic Minority Leader representing District 8, is not with us today. Gary and I want to share with you initiatives and concerns that we have about some of the issues facing our county and our citizens. Many of our communities are under considerable stress. Employment uncertainties, ever-increasing cost of living, and for many, significant destruction from recent floods and just generally trying to stay afloat and provide their families are daily challenges. Local governments are equally challenged. Government is supposed to be an aid to its citizens, but all too often, the citizens view their government as a cause of a lot of their stress. Sometimes it's an unfair assertion, but sometimes the case can be made that the best intentions just don't measure up. We called you here this morning to present a minority view of needed changes and actions from our perspective to help make Herkimer County government be more responsive and accountable to its citizens. We thank you for attending. We'll have copies of this for anyone interested following the session. I'm first going to speak about my experiences on the legislature as it relates to the Herkimer County Jail facility. In the past 5 years that I've been on the legislature, we've seen the county leadership pretty much continue to push for the construction of a new jail. Unbelievable pressure, and at times outright bullying by the State Commission of Corrections has driven much of this. We have seen many hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on site studies, population studies, seeker studies, lawyers, not to mention the contentious battle between communities and legislators. And where are we on it? The majority has voted the required supermajority votes years ago to proceed with bonding. We await a ruling by the courts on the Village of Herkimer's challenge to the county's plan to site at the PNC on Route 28. We have a group of self-appointed leaders who have been working outside the legislative committee structure with a contracted architect on jail design and operations. We own no land earmarked for the jail, and thankfully have not taken any through eminent domain. And if and when that happens, it will no doubt result in additional legal action. And why no significant progress, despite the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent? I guess, and I hope, there remains in the minds of some of the less entrenched a belief that we might not be on the path of a physically sound solution. Should we build a $35 million plus or minus jail? Or should we explore a different concept in jail design that offers potential savings of over $16 million? That option was not considered in 2011 when the minority questioned why discussions with this new firm were rejected by the leadership and not brought to the full legislature. Since that time, our county has spent over $250,000 on Labella. Fortunately, new attempts in 2012 by the minority was successful in getting two of the majority to engage in a dialogue with Goldberg Associates on a prefab metal cells. Will it bear fruit? We don't know. Should it have happened in 2011? Of course. But I think it's better late than never. Actually, legislators Schrader and Johnson are in Georgia on their own dime looking at the new design. So will we soon be at a point of voting to change the design concepts of a new jail facility? We hope not. Not before we more fully explore the true cost to the taxpayers. For many years, our county has boarded out inmates. Neighboring counties have been used with significant costs to the taxpayers. We have paid $85 plus each day per inmate plus transportation costs. When locks failed on several cells in the jail, we were many months waiting for replacements. We can speculate on the reasons these 7 cells came offline for as long as they did, almost a year, and quibble over the $200 plus thousand that was spent on boarding while we awaited replacement locks. But the net is nonetheless significant cost to the taxpayers of this community. Some would say having a new jail would have resulted in savings to the taxpayers. Others, using the county's own figures, would demonstrate how boarding out actually is less expensive than what it costs us to operate our jail and the related costs of a new facility. Our communities are divided on whether construction is really a physically sound approach. Some believe building bigger than what Herkimer truly needs will give us a funding stream to offset operating costs, but that group is far less vocal. Some might be against a new jail regardless of cost. Some want this facility regardless of cost, and some just don't know. And we don't believe the county has done a good enough job to make the fiscal case. And what happens? Our community is polarized. How do we once and for all review the figures on construction versus boarding out in a bipartisan way? The Democratic minority has written to Comptroller DiNapoli to request that he offer assistance to define the costs and compare the options available to Herkimer County. We aren't asking for a philosophical analysis, but rather clear fiscal comparisons of the options. This wouldn't be a partisan review, but rather an impartial cost analysis. We want to know if his office is available to offer this service, and we ask and will ask the majority to join us in support of this request. We recognize that even if the figures support a board out, cooperation with neighboring counties is essential. But let's not prejudge what negotiations could yield on a regional approach. Cooperation between counties can benefit each and certainly the taxpayers. We believe most taxpayers aren't adverse to it and actually would like to see leadership to explore and compromise not only on this option but many others. Our taxpayers have been contributing to a jail fund since 2007. The 0.25% sales tax, along with over $5 million in tobacco settlement funds that have been earmarked for jail construction, represent a significant reserve. Over $15 million. Post the floods of June and July, we know our communities are struggling, looking at how they will afford FEMA local match that will be required. It could be 12.5% on public reconstruction costs. Wouldn't it be wonderful to know the jail reserve, all or part of it, could be redirected to those efforts to help? Infrastructure improvements are needed at the county and at the local level. Will there be reserves for them? Will they be there? Government must function within the 2% or less property tax cap. What will be compromised to do that? Taking a hard look at the fiscal costs of the jail is a start, and we hope that the Comptroller agrees. We hope that the majority will join with us in that request. I now will have Gary comment on this aspect if he chooses, and also speak to the need to realign our resources. Gary?
Good morning, everyone. I appreciate you coming down today. Just to touch on a couple of things, Mrs. Rhodes did a terrific job explaining why we think we need a nonpartisan expert to explore the real options and the costs thereof. I know I have heard from some of my fellow legislators that talk about the boarding out and potential cooperation with Oneida County, for example. And a letter was produced a long time ago from Mr. Vicente, I believe, saying that he didn't express a strong willingness to explore that option at the time. However, I can tell you I spoke to him a couple months ago, and he would be open to real negotiations. We went there at one point, and in fact I was embarrassed, and the Herkimer County representatives conducted themselves. We weren't looking for open, real negotiations at the time. This Goldberg option, it provides some hope. I still think there are probably some other, there definitely are other options, some of which, in my mind, are much more cost-effective and beneficial. However, the fact that that was brought forward gives me some hope that there is some open mind among my colleagues to exploring other options and a willingness to look at the options, some of which have been there all along. As far as the Goldberg options, you may be surprised to know there are legislators claiming that this was a new development. Some of our residents and one of our legislators was contacted 4 years ago by the company, and nothing was pursued up until now. The minority and our residents tried to pursue that option years ago. As far as eminent domain, I know it's got to be done. If you don't, like, you can expand an airport at another location or a highway or whatever, but when there is another option, I think eminent domain is mean-spirited and a strong-arm government tactic that we don't need. There is no willing seller at the Village PNC site, and to steamroll over a businessman when we have other options is just plain wrong. As far as my proposal that I discussed with Mrs. Rose, and it was brought forward by our minority leader, at least in part. Well, first of all, regarding the flood, let me just tell you, I walked around for weeks afterwards, talking to residents, seeing residents, visiting our municipal workers, National Grid, emergency, disaster command post, and I was so impressed with everyone. And the state and federal government were very helpful, but I was more impressed than ever of my neighbors or your neighbors, who all stuck together. And thankfully, we're going to get through this. And also our municipal workers, I talk to some of them daily. They work day and night on our behalf, and we are fortunate to have such a strong and helpful municipal workforce. As we all know that the landlords and others were left out of the state flood recovery plan, and in spite of the fact that some are claiming that it wasn't put straightforward initially, it is in the guidelines, unfortunately. There has to be an owner-occupied property. However, I would suggest that some of that $15 million that Mrs. Rose spoke about that's being put away for an oversized jail in the wrong location, perhaps we should study whether it be feasible, legal, to use some of that money to cover some of those that aren't covered by the state flood recovery plan. There would have to be specific criteria. I did say explore. I'm not sure if it's 100% legal or feasible, but it's certainly something we should be looked at. There's got to be specific criteria. We all know there are landlords that are absentees, that don't invest in their properties. I don't know if it could be put in there that it's a resident, but it's something that could be discussed, and we should seriously look at that. Also, the 1% sales tax that was taken away from municipalities in 2006, I was there the night before that money was taken away. It used to go to municipalities a significant amount. It was a strong bipartisan effort to convince the legislature not to take that money away. I was on the phone for 2-3 days straight with Republican supervisors, town clerks, village clerks. It's not a Democrat-Republican issue. I can tell you that 90% of the municipal workforce and leaders wanted that to stay where it belongs. And why should it stay there? It's because the municipalities that I spoke about that were on there, that were there the day and night during the flood, spent days pumping out cellars. There were county and state workers, but year-round, our village and town workers are the ones that keep those businesses open, keep the roads open, take care of virtually every service that enables those businesses that generate the sales tax windfall for the county to operate. So my suggestion would be, now is the time to give that back to them. Should have been done a long time ago. However, it's more critical now because the municipalities will be stuck with a 25% match for the FEMA. In regards to it, there was $40 million in FEMA money came to the affected towns and villages. 25 of the villages and towns have to provide a 25% match. That's a significant amount of money. Believe me, I was a village board member, deputy mayor for 13 years, and when they took that 1% sales tax away from us, first place it killed us. 25% match of FEMA doesn't sound like it a lot, but it sure is. I think we have the funds, and we have that 1% we should give back, so let's give that back to the municipalities. Excuse me, I left I left everything at the office. But, so I believe that should be explored. I call on my colleagues, who appear to have an open mind, some of them, on other jail options. Let's explore other opportunities. Let's start with joining us in our call to the controller to find out what the real figures are and what would be more cost effective. And let's provide relief for Herkimer County landlords and others left behind, and our municipalities that keep us going. Thank you.
I would just add on the potential redistribution of sales tax, or if we're fortunate enough to be able to see that there's the reserves that are made for the jail can easily be, or can be, redeployed to other more important options. I don't want to prejudge what the state controller will say, because I do want it to be an impartial analysis of what it will cost us. But we have reserves in this county. You know, when we sit here for budget conversations, we have the highway reserve, and oftentimes it's taken, the money is taken from the highway reserve to control the tax levy. But we know our infrastructure is in trouble. We know, I sat at a highway committee meeting, and I have the highest regard for the highway department and the Jay Owanek in charge of it, and talked about the kinds of things we won't be able to do because we're going to be doing the things that need to be done relative to the floods. Some of that is manpower issues. Some of it will perhaps be money. We'll have money in the highway department budget when we get reimbursed, and therefore that can create the reserve again, and we use that again to offset taxes. Some people will celebrate that and say that's wonderful, and it is very important that we control taxes. But the idea that we're not able to fund the infrastructure repairs that we need, that our municipalities are struggling. The 1% when it was taken, and I can hear some of the legislators in this room, excuse me, educating those of us who were not here in 2006 when it happened. Medicaid costs were ever rising. The costs to the counties were significant. They wanted it to help hedge what was happening with Medicaid. But changes are in the wind on Medicaid. The state's role in it, can we trust it? I guess we're going to have to trust and verify. A Republican said that once, I think. I believe that unlike some of the majority, we in the minority don't always agree. And we're not afraid to fight it out and hammer it out. Some of the things that Mr. Hartman said today, I don't know that I 100% agree with him, but I'm willing to sit in the room and hammer it out. That's what we need to have happen here. We need to have greater dialogue on how we're going to be using the resources. And that brings me to the next topic that I wanted to discuss, and Gary and I are supporting. And it's about changes in the county legislature's rules. A basic tenet of democracy is minority rights and majority rule. Unfortunately, in Herkimer County, recent past practices of the legislature has shown little regard for this fundamental principle of democracy. We came before in a news conference in January of 2012, the start of this term, and asked that there be changes in the structure of our rules so that a minority is present on each and every committee of this legislature. It didn't happen. It hasn't happened, and we've seen the folly of that over these many years. The chairman of the legislature is selected by the majority vote of the full body of the legislature. Current rules allow that chairman to assign members to committees without guidelines as to placement of minority party on committees. During our current term, we have seen the minority excluded from most committee assignments. Despite that, we've been diligent, very diligent, in our attendance at committee meetings. We are fortunate enough to have a concerned citizens group that is taping them. Should you miss a meeting, we watch the airing of it on the website of the Concerned Citizens Group, and at times it's broadcast at HCCC. But being present alone is not full participation. The energy it takes to overcome the prejudice of committee assignments could be much better utilized. Some decisions made within committees do not necessarily require a vote before the full legislature. Thorough discussion of issues are not freely entertained, always, or are they required. Minutes of committee meetings do not reflect agreement or dissension by non-committee members. Therefore, minority views are not acknowledged or their weight in the discussion recorded. This process may be expedient, but it isn't acceptable to exclude duly elected representatives and attempt to marginalize the minority and the citizens they represent. It's not good for Herkimer County. It's not good for democracy. We, the current Democratic minority, will propose rule changes in the way standing committees are structured, and assignments of members are made. We propose that these rule changes take place at the start of the 2014 term. We don't know what party will be the minority, but we pledge to support these proposed changes regardless and call on the Administration and Veterans Committee to take this up with adequate haste to have changes implemented by the full legislature prior to year end. We propose the following changes, and we believe they're fair and they will properly represent our communities. We propose that all standing committees be comprised of 7 members, of whom the chairman of the legislature will be one of the 7. Currently, our rules call for 4 to 7. But with 17 legislators, 7 on a committee seems reasonable. You can debate whether 17 is reasonable, but 7 on a committee from 17 is. That's an ad lib, it's not my statement. Membership on each standing committee will consist of no less than 1 legislator from the minority party. Additional assignments will be made to each committee in the ratio of party membership to the whole of the legislature, not unlike what exists in state and national government. Actual assignments, and this is a change we're proposing, actual assignments of individual legislators to meet the established ratio will be made by the respective caucuses. Currently, the chairman decides who will sit on committees. We're proposing that the actual assignments of individual legislators to meet the established ratio will be made by the respective caucus. The chairman of the legislature will assign chairmanship of each standing committee from among those assigned through the respective caucus. The chairman still would assign who will be the chairman of the respective committee. The members of each committee, though, will select a vice chair from among their membership. President Thomas Jefferson proclaimed in his first inaugural address, "All, too, will bear in mind this sacred principle, that though the will of the majority in all cases to prevail, that will, to be rightful, must be reasonable, that the minority possess their equal rights, which laws must protect, and to violate which would be oppression." We can do better in Herkimer County, and we call on the current majority to join us to ensure that current inequitable practices are changed. I have in my packet the letter that we wrote to Comptroller Giannopoli and asking that he will consider assisting us in the jail figures. It's the first step that we have to try to break this gridlock that exists in our community. 17 legislators in the room, the votes are here, folks. The votes are here to move forward with the jail. It's been demonstrated time and again, and we have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. But it hasn't happened yet, and part of it may be the lawsuits by the Village of Herkimer. And if that is the case, and should the comptroller's figures show that it's folly, or should the trip to Georgia yield a design that works for Herkimer County and saves us millions of dollars, then we can thank the Village of Herkimer for holding up this process, if indeed that's what has held it. I still like to believe that within this room, there's enough individuals who will listen to reason, will listen to their constituents, and the constituents themselves will raise the question to be able to advance these ideas. These are not all solutions. These are proposals. Negotiations is what happens, and we, the Democratic minority, want to be part of those negotiations. We insist on being part of the negotiations. Choosing this vehicle to communicate not only with the media but with the citizens is necessary for us, because all too often, those of you who have sat in this room have heard the minority shut down from being able to state their position. And it's quite effective until it gets unruly. We don't want to be unruly. We want to go to get the message out, and we want the feedback, and we will join with the Republican majority to try to find those solutions. We just need it open, and the fact that it's coming from Democratic mouths does not make it wrong. We're part of the process, we're part of the problem, and we choose to be part of the solution. I thank you for being here. Gary, if you have any summary, and then we'll take any questions anyone has.
Yes, just, I'll go back and touch on a few things. Number one, Helen is 100% right. Members of the minority do disagree with each other, and I still love it. But you know, that's the way it should be. We can have a sometimes loud and heated discussion, and we're going to remain friends forever, nevertheless. And that's the way it should be between members of minority and majority, and we do our part. As far as the committee process, you watch Congress and the state government, other municipalities, or other counties that have committees, there's always a minority representation. I would challenge anyone to find another one that doesn't. And I know because I'm obsessed with that stuff, ask my kids. I'm stuck on C-SPAN. And granted, I'm here in the morning and holding a news conference. I got an event in the afternoon. I do take a vacation once in a while, and work's piling up while I'm here. But the fact that they recently moved every meeting to a weekday morning or afternoon just simply is not right. It doesn't support the democratic process. And I can't, because I haven't gotten a legitimate reason for it, we are told it's so department heads could be there. Well, you look around at night, those department heads are there. And they were when we had those committee meetings at night. So I haven't gotten a logical explanation. I could only assume that part of it is to keep me and other members of the minority of a daytime job away. I got contacted by a couple business people who are kind of upset with the fact that they can offer us in the legislature a lot. If you're holding everything in the afternoon, these business people, the small businesses that we all know and love, they can't leave their businesses to come running here. So consequently, we're kind of driving them away from the process. This isn't part of our proposal, but I've called that up before, say we should go back to evening committee meetings. It worked up until months ago. The department heads were there. There's no reason not to. Other than the vast majority of legislators either work for themselves, are retired, or don't have other daytime jobs. But the vast majority of the public does. It's the 1% sales tax. Well, let me add, I talked about the flood recovery and 25% FEMA match that municipalities need. Mrs. Rose touched on the fact that the infrastructure needs. Our municipalities are hurting big time. As a village official, we always wanted to upgrade things gradually. The money's just not there. Not only upgrade the crumbling infrastructure, we have flood mitigation work to do all over the county. And the towns and villages will be doing a lot of that. They should get that 1% back. When it was taken away, Mrs. Rose mentioned the Medicaid excuse. Well, as myself and the town supervisors and clerks pointed out to the legislators, I personally called all 17 of them at the time in 2006. That Medicaid hitting the roof scare, it did go up some. But before that 2006 vote, the rationale for taking that money did not happen because there was a Medicaid cap put in place. I guess we'll leave it at that. I call on my colleagues to join us in our proposals. They can open up the process, and we can all learn from each other, and we may learn something from the controller. You talk about those committee meetings, Helen and I make them when we can. It's a little more difficult these days because they move them to the afternoon. I think we have something to offer, and I think members of the majority have something to offer. We all should openly discuss it, no matter who we are, what name, whether we're labeled Democrat, Independent, or whatever. We all have a lot to learn from each other, so we should have open discussions.
Thank you, Gary. Just one other thing, because whether it's late breaking news or rehashing of old fears, the issue about the Remington Arms is a concern for all of us. And I don't have any solid information. I haven't had, I'm not privy to a discussion that's been held among the legislature, or any recent discussion with the news of Tennessee trying to court the Remington Arms corporate or expansion there. We know the Remington Arms is critically important to our community. We know that we support it. I was in this room when we voted the money for it. We have to be ever vigilant. We also can't be held ransom. I listened to the mayor of Villian today mention, or last night's news actually, mentioned the potential of a one-story building. I don't know what that means, what we might be considering, but this is again a case where we should be in the discussion. The discussions need to be within the committee structures, and we need to be present in them, and our voices need to be heard, and our citizens need to stay vigilant on it. So we don't have any more solid information on it. I hope that it's not a solid plan for anyone to pull out and go to Tennessee. We need the Remington Arms here. It's a cornerstone of manufacturing, and too many have left. So again, thank you for coming. Are there any questions from anybody, Gary?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just briefly on the arms, yes, it's always a concern when we hear these nightmare stories, and I don't know if it's new news or old news that just got picked up in the Tennessean. In any event, I'll continue with what I've been doing since the time there's a threat to leave. I'll be on the phone again today with our state senator, hopefully our U.S. senators, and Hannah's office. And hopefully we can all work together to get through another scare. I just want to point out I put that statement out months ago, but I think it's pertinent now. I think there's many reasons why the arms should stay here. May I also point out they had a major upgrade in March that they are going forward with at the Ilion plant. There are many positive benefits of Remington's current location that should receive attention, and the Remington officials should take note, and I'm sure they are. We have a dedicated world-class workforce that already possesses the necessary skills and knowledge of the industry. We have inexpensive Ilion municipal power, thanks to the Ilion officials and members of the Ilion community. We have a $2 million investment by Herkimer County toward the arms upgrades in 2009. A history of support which has been reassured to me once again over the course of the last few months. History of support from Republican and Democrat, New York State administration officials, and state representatives that has resulted in the investment of over $6 million by New York State in recent years to assist Remington's efforts, which have made the existing location of the state-of-the-art firearms facility. And the upgrades announced in March will further upgrade it. There has been a history of support from Democrat and Republicans from the New York State congressional delegation that has enabled Remington to secure over $200 million in federal military contracts in recent years. I spoke to Mr. R. Curry today, who was pivotal in getting those contracts opened up before, I think, I left my notes home, or they're not here. I believe it was in 2009 that the arms was first able to get these federal contracts, and it's because Mr. R. Curry and U.S. Senator Schumer passed legislation to enable companies like the arms to compete for those contracts. So that $200 million is huge. It's a big part of their business, and I think the arms people will take this under consideration, and I plead to them that they do. Thank you.
Any questions from anybody? Yes.
I just would like you guys to address a little bit about, we read the paper and we're always seeing that Oneida County is, revitalizing and doing, wonderful things. And I kind of don't see that happening so much in Herkimer County as far as, new business, touch on the unemployment. I think that we need to, embrace some of the other areas, and I just thought maybe you guys would like to touch on that,
Economic development
lack of industry.
Economic development is critical. If we're going to contain taxes, that's the way we're going to do it too, by bringing in good, viable businesses. The IDA markets, this legislature voted $250,000, $125,000 to market the business parks, $125,000 to maintain them. we haven't seen many fruits of that labor. I'm a firm believer, and I heard Tony Pacenti say that when he spoke with the governor, that the borders between Herkimer and Oneida County are nothing but dots on a map. They're not the Berlin Wall, is the line that I use. We need to work cooperatively. I think there are some discussions, but it's too easy to get bogged down in our own. What's good for Herkimer County can be good for Oneida County. What's good for Oneida County can be good for Herkimer County. We need to be more aggressive in that. We need to be able to access grants. We need to be able to get out there and talk to businesses. I'm not very happy with some of the lack of achievement on the part of the IDA. I'm not happy with recent plans on the pumpkin patch. I voted for the slaughterhouse that was going to go there, but the problem I have is that after the millions that have been spent, that's the only option we've been called upon to vote to consider. I have concerns about what could co-locate in that space. We have vacant business parks all around us. The message has got to get out that Herkimer County is moving forward. We need to move forward. Infighting, being bogged down on issues does not give that public image. That's why our proposal today on the jail is truly and sincerely an attempt to be able to resolve once and for all what the costs are, and then move forward based on people's philosophical views on what should happen. But we can't ignore the fiscal consequences of what is being proposed. So economic development is critical. Remington Arms is a critical kingpin in our community. We need to stay vigilant. And we are prepared to do that. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Sure, I'm sorry.
There is a reason other than the jail that I've reached out to Mr. Pacenti and other Oneida County representatives. Mrs. Rose is right, there's no border there. And what's good for them is good for us. And I know my father made a living in Oneida County at GE. And also, Oneida County, I really have a lot of faith and hope for the high-tech business that they're trying to pull in. And if that happens, we could get some of that overflow. But it's not gonna happen if we close within our borders, put a dome over ourselves. I don't like those guys in Oneida County or whatever. They did this to us in the past or whatever. We gotta open up to them in the industry and definitely do a better job of marketing ourselves. I think that whatever $125,000 marketing plan was turned out kind of worthless to me. I did vote. I was a lone vote against the slaughterhouse, but unless you want more details, I won't get into it right now. The big problem was that I got a brief memo on a not yet to be named corporation about 3 days before I was asked to vote on it. I wanted time to know more about the industry, environmental factors, potential markets, what the farmers want to know, or what do the farmers want and need. And actually, since that time, I didn't learn a lot in 72 hours. I have since then, and a lot of it's not been good. But yes, we got to reach out to Oneida County, our neighbors everywhere. Mm-hmm. We have to do some recruiting. We got to free up some of that $15 million in 0.25% sales tax to help our local businesses. There's a lot we can do.
Thank you. Any other questions? I want to thank you very much for coming. I thank the media for coming and help us get the message out. And we'll linger around here if anyone has any questions they want to ask after. Thank you all very much.